Sheriff, a word and position that derive from the Old English term Shire-Reeve. This person was responsible for managing a shire or county in England. The practice began sometime before 700 AD, and when America was colonized by European settlers, we brought the concept with us. Today in the U.S., 48 out of 50 states have sheriffs. Alaska doesn't have counties and therefore has no sheriffs, and Connecticut replaced its sheriff system with state marshals in 2000. In 46 out of the 48 states with the sheriff system, the sheriffs are elected officials and mostly serve 4-year terms. The duties of sheriff vary from state to state and even from county to county. In the South and Western states, sheriffs are seen as the constitutional law enforcement officer, and the position is held in high esteem. Also, the more rural the county, the more likely the sheriff is the primary law enforcement agency. Sheriffs are also typically responsible for the jail and court systems in their county, making the position difficult and challenging on a number of levels. For sheriffs, leadership is an important skill. Not only must they lead their officers and civilian employees, but they must also lead in the jails, the courts, and because of the political nature of the position, in the community. As for notable people that have held the position of sheriff in American history, it's an interesting list. From historical figures like Bat Masterson, Daniel Boone, and Grover Cleveland, to controversial ones like Buford Pusser, Grady Judd, and Joe Arpaio. I realized if I wanted to discuss leadership in law enforcement, I would be remiss if I didn't talk to at least one sheriff, and I had a perfect candidate in mind. It's time to start telling our own stories. I'm Steve Kellums, and welcome to Blue Canary. Sheriff Chris Lane was elected on November 8, 2022 as the 59th Sheriff of Bartholomew County, Indiana. Sheriff Lane has dedicated over 30 years to law enforcement. During this time, he served in a variety of positions, including patrol, supervision, administration, and investigations. He was appointed as Chief Deputy of the Bartholomew County Sheriff's Department from 2015 to 2022. Sheriff Lane is also a 2019 graduate of the FBI National Academy, joining an elite group that makes up less than 1% of America's law enforcement community. And the most important part of his background? We went to the police academy together. Chris, thanks so much for coming on and talking to me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem, Steve. Anytime.
You know, we go way back. We actually attended the police academy together, and it's nice now as I'm at the end of my career and traveling around teaching, seeing where you've come in your career. For the audience, if you don't mind, describe your journey through law enforcement, how you ended up being sheriff.
Oh man, I tell you, time absolutely flies by, and it's just crazy because it seems like just yesterday we were at IU together, and that was 1989.
Right.
And when we went through the academy there that summer of '89, I went to Vincennes University and graduated down there with associates and transferred to IU and went through the whole academy and was there in Bloomington until '91 when I got hired on the Columbus City Police Department. Had a very good long career at CPD, about 21 years or so, almost 22. Done my time, got to touch a little bit of everything you can imagine in police work, from different levels of supervision to investigations, undercover investigations, done a little bit of internal type stuff, and took what I call my little 2-year sabbatical after I left CPD and went to work for the Indiana State Gaming Commission for a couple years. My parents were getting older at the time, and I wanted to kind of get back close. I grew up in a town called Paoli. It's in southern Indiana. French Lick Casino was down there real close, so I could kind of drive back and forth and stay down there with them during the week while I was an agent at French Lick. So I did that for a couple years. That was not as much on the criminal side, a lot more regulatory type of a position, and then had the opportunity to come back here to Columbus and was asked to be the chief deputy at the sheriff's office, the Bartholomew County Sheriff's Office. And so I did that. Came on January 2015, actually as the chief. In Indiana, we have chief deputies. Some states, they're called under sheriffs. But did that for the 2 terms that Sheriff Matt Myers was in for 8 years, and then I ran for sheriff myself, and now I'm in my second year of my first term as sheriff.
You know, it was funny whenever we first connected before I hit record, I said, how are things going? And you said, drinking from a fire hose. Has that been your experience since you moved into that position as sheriff?
Yeah, very much so. Second seat, you might say, as the chief, just right underneath the sheriff. When I came in this role as sheriff, I thought, well, I got this pretty much figured out. I've been pretty much running operations and everything for the last 8 years. But I'll tell you, when you make it over to the corner office, the way our building's kind of set up, in the sheriff's office, I learned real quick that I didn't have a lot of stuff figured out, because as the chief deputy, my focus was on the operations of the sheriff's office, including the jail, and had good staff, good jail commander and good road commanders and that stuff underneath me. So, that was my world. But when you become the sheriff, there's a lot of other things that come into play, and just being a community, that community leader. Just like yesterday, we have what they call a Stride Center. It's a mental health type facility here through Centerstone. I know they have one over in Bloomington too. I was one of the guest speakers at that in front of City Hall, and that's something that I really had to do. Gotten real good about speaking in front of people. Doesn't bother me anymore. And pretty much what I've learned, I don't have a script. I just go speak from the heart, and that seems to do okay. I do okay with that. But just all the different community involvements. I'm going to be a co-lead on a Healthy Communities project, and on another project on a whole mental health called Mental Health Matters in Bartholomew County, and interacting with everybody else from the hospital to Centerstone to the city to the state. I'm on the state 911 board. I'm the only sheriff out of the 92 sheriffs that was chosen to be on that board, as appointed by the governor. So, yeah, I thought I had it figured out over 8 years, but then when I got in this seat, I figured out there's a lot of other moving parts.
I think that's really interesting, because I had the exact same experience, that every time I got promoted, I saw what the people above me did. I was like, oh, I can do that. But then as soon as I got promoted in that position, I realized I didn't really understand what their job was. So I've had the exact same experiences that you. Did you see that with other promotions in your past, or was it really just the sheriff's one that kind of got you?
No, I can say it was pretty much, I agree. Every time you rolled into a different position, whether it be a promotion or a different assignment, when you're kind of on that outside looking through the window glass, and you might say, you think you kind of got it figured out until you're actually behind that glass and having to do the job. So, yeah, I'd say it was different. Just like when I was just a new patrolman, and then ended up taking an assignment in narcotics, and that was a whole different learning curve and trying to figure that out, and then rolled into a detective position. And that again, I thought, oh, I've been doing drug work for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. How big a deal is it going to be to roll into doing just regular detective work? Well, it's a big difference, and major difference. And when you go from narcotics work, where you're actually kind of taking part of the crime while it's going on, you might say, to being totally reactive as a detective, was a totally different type of investigative type work. So, yeah, I totally agree. Whether it doesn't necessarily have to be a promotion, just a lateral move to a different assignment is different.
Looking at your leadership positions you've held over the years, when did you first find yourself as a leader? And I'm specifically looking at those informal leadership positions. When you looked around and realized, okay, it looks like I'm the guy in charge. When did that first happen for you?
Probably when I went into really investigations, whether it was with narcotics or just being a regular criminal investigator. At the department I was at, there wasn't any rank distinction between on that. You was just classified as a detective. But when you had a crime, if it was whether it was a homicide or theft case, fraud, or whatever, and you got to sign that case, or you were called out on a major investigation, you were in charge of that investigation. This is your case. And in essence, if it was a crime scene, I had sergeants, lieutenants, and maybe even captains that I was given direction to, because this was my investigation. And I wanted things to go a certain way. So I think right then was one of those, depending on your assignment, I was placed in a leadership role at different times just by the mere fact of what hand I got dealt on that particular evening and called out on, and I had to take charge and run that investigation, because essentially is my name was going to be the one on filing those. If there's going to be criminal charges, I'd be the one signing that affidavit.
It's funny as you're talking, I remember the very first time that I was a sergeant at the time, and I remember the very first time my lieutenant was responding to a scene, and it was a big scene that I had gotten out on first. And as he was responding, I basically stopped him and said, "Don't come here. I need you to stop and block traffic." And he did. And I remember that moment vividly as the point in which it was like, this is where all of a sudden I'm going to be in charge, even of people that have more authority than me, because of that scene. Did you ever have a time in which something like that happened to you?
Oh yeah, I mean, whether it be a major crash scene out on the interstate, or as a patrolman, if you're the first one on the scene, that's your scene. You're the one to manage it, and it's your responsibility to manage it. And you got other supervisors that you're working with, and you needed traffic directed, or if you needed somebody to be them to stop a car or whatever, you didn't hesitate. You just had to step into that leadership role and make that call.
One of the things that I've kind of been harping on is this idea that we don't provide good training for our people, particularly to the next jobs they're going to take. Very rarely are we providing leadership training prior to them taking leadership roles, or even training to do the job they're getting promoted to. What was your experience on your promotions? Did you ever receive training, whether leadership training or just training to do the job, before you took the job? Or was it always after, if any?
I agree with you. That I think has been a struggle in law enforcement. I remember I got promoted to sergeant, just a road patrol sergeant. Came out of detectives, and to get promoted, you pretty much had to come back to the patrol side. Got promoted to sergeant out of detectives, and I hadn't worked the road in, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years. So I had to kind of get reacclimated to that. And now I'm in a supervisory role. And then I was probably in a sergeant's position for probably close to 2 years before I got ever sent to first line supervisor school. And I remember going to that school. It was a 3 or 4 day class, and I'm like, well, I wish I'd have known that 6 months ago. I wish the things they're talking about. And I really think that we as leaders and as chiefs of police and sheriffs, we need to do a better job. And we put some things in here at our sheriff's office when I came sheriff to try to get people groomed to take that next step, and to have them somewhat ready with some basic supervisor training, and make it even, maybe we haven't got to this place yet, to where it's a prereq. If you think you want to be a sergeant, here's a class you may want, or here's this training you may want to put in for. But there's a lot of moving parts with, especially the sheriff's office, when you get to promotions, merit boards, and different things like that to put it in place. But I think in my experience over the years, I kind of had to learn by the school of hard knocks, and I had to make a few mistakes to learn from, where thank God, it all worked out. But in the ideal world, I think there's a lot of training that should be taking place before you ever get put into that role.
Yeah. Why do you think that police departments struggle with this? I think it's a pretty obvious step, but universally, it just doesn't happen. So do you have any ideas of why you think that is?
Well, I think in the past, and you can go back 30 years here.
Right.
I think it was just kind of the way it was done. I think a lot of times promotions was just made you as kind of just the next person at the bat type of deal. Where I think in today's world, I think that culture is changing, and a lot of the stuff with our Indiana Sheriff's Association and different training that I know they put out is a lot more geared towards that initial supervisor training before they're ever into that role, so that you're not setting somebody up for failure. So I do think there's a reset that's taking place right now. And I think that just because a lot of things that's happened around the country in different scenarios, that I think there's a lot more emphasis put on training today than there maybe was 10, 15, or 20 years ago. And I think there's a lot more emphasis put on leadership type training. I'm a graduate of the FBI National Academy, which is probably, when you talk about leadership and opportunities, that's the premier of any school you can ever go to. I went through session 278. I graduated in the winter of 2019. Spent 11 weeks out at Quantico. And all the leadership classes that we took through the NA. But here I am. At the time, I'm chief deputy at the sheriff's office, had 25 years of policing under my belt, and I just now got to go to the National Academy. And I know there's some restructuring they've talked about putting into place to where they can start, because you need to be a lieutenant or above before you can even put in to get to go. And there's so many limited spots. I mean, for the whole state of Indiana, I think there's maybe only 16 officers a year that gets to go to the National Academy, because during the 4 sessions, there's four per session. So it's limited, but I do think there's a lot, and I know when I was out there, a lot more emphasis put on that leadership training in general, and then a lot, which I think is a positive, on the whole mental health of our fellow officers too. I think's getting the well-needed attention also.
So I never had an opportunity to go to the National Academy, and as you've said, it's limited, and you have to be at certain ranks at times to go. Do you have any ideas how we might push that down to the lower ranks? How might we create something or build something that would allow those officers, even at the officer level, to start learning some of these really important lessons instead of waiting towards the ends of their careers?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the bad things. It's almost, you have to be in that leadership role before you can ever get to go to that. Now I know there's a lot of other schools. There's Pella. I attended Pella Police Executive Leadership Academy. There's Northwestern, Southern Police. There's all kinds of different trainings out there. Unfortunately for those, they're quite expensive to send somebody to. Compared to the National Academy, it's there's no cost other than the officer's salary while you're sending them. But I do think there needs to be more, and with our own Sheriff's Association, they're doing a good job pushing out a lot of free training that can be done online nowadays. And I think probably one of the, just like what we're doing here, chatting over a computer, there's a lot of training opportunities that there didn't used to be. But I am a little concerned. Are we putting too much faith in that online training? And because you can't substitute face to face.
Absolutely. I hate online training. I see the benefits for agencies because, as you said, cost and time, but I hate it because of the lack of personal connection, the lack of being able to have in-depth conversations. Even this setup, as I'm talking to you, I'm actually picturing us sitting down, in 1989 talking. That's kind of where my head's at as we're chatting, which is great. And I think that without those types of personal connections, the lessons over online aren't quite as positive as they could be.
Yeah, you totally lose that. But I mean, really what it comes down to is, like everything, it's funding and having a robust training budget. And I know I struggle with it here at the sheriff's office for my training budget, and we try to plan out for the year on what we tend to do, but then you always get a curveball thrown at you. Okay, well, I got to get some people to accident recon school, which is not cheap. And because you have one of your employees retire or quit that was your recon instructor, so we need to make a $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 investment and send a couple to recon or crime scene school. So sometimes I think it's real easy. You'll get those things that pop up that you have to have in your wheelhouse to tool, you might say, and then unfortunately, the leadership classes get put down to the bottom, and they end up doing it in an online type scenario, which is not the best.
Well, and I don't want to devolve the conversation into budgets, but I know that your budget, well, I assume that your budget, like most police budgets where 90% of it's in salary, doesn't leave you a whole lot of wiggle room for all that extra stuff.
Most definitely, and I actually, as a sheriff's office, I got three budgets. I got the sheriff budget, which is your policing side. I got the jail budget, and then I got one of the obligation as sheriff is courthouse, and I got the courthouse security. That's under my constitutional obligation. We're officers of the court, so that's a whole nother budget. So just for here in Bartholomew County, my total budget with all three of those is around a little over $14 million. And the vast majority of that is salary and benefits.
Now, moving back towards some of the leadership and positional stuff that you've held, I'm curious, if you go back and think, which position did you hold where you truly felt like you learned how to lead people?
Really, it's those frontline supervisors. They're frontline. They're the unsung heroes of the supervisor world, I think. A sergeant's probably the hardest supervisor job I ever had, because you're kind of in a situation, you're that supervisor, but you're also you're out there hitting the street every day with your subordinates and taking calls and running calls. In an agency the sizes that I've worked for, you're not just showing up on a call to supervise. You're actually, you could be the lead on that call, plus trying to keep your radio ear tuned in to everything else going on. So, that probably my most enjoyable time was being a lieutenant and having my assigned shift and being a shift lieutenant. I probably learned, I enjoyed that supervisory position better than probably anything I've ever held, because it was I had my little piece of the pie, you might say. If I had third shift, I had my crew, and I had my three sergeants that worked for me, and we knew kind of what we needed to do, and we were a tight-knit group. And I think that was probably where I learned to lead the most, and probably had the most best time, I guess.
Now, you've made that transition. Moving into sheriff is a big transition. And, for those who are listening, most sheriffs across the United States are elected officials, and you're an elected official. So you had to make that step into politics. Now, how difficult was that? And did it change your leadership style any?
Well, I can guarantee you this. When we was at Indiana University in 1989, Chris Lane never thought he'd be sheriff. And I can tell you, probably 10 to 15 years ago, I really didn't think that was going to be in my wheelhouse.
Chris, if we were picking people from our class that were going to be sheriffs, you would not have been at the top of my list either.
But it's life just kind of takes you in different areas and different angles, you might say. But I worked when I was at the city police. Highest rank, I was a captain, a road captain over there for a few years, and then when I retired from there, and then came over here as the chief. I guess there's politics and a little bit of everything, but when you're the sheriff, and we're different than a chief of police. I'm placed here by the citizens of Bartholomew County. They're the ones that picked me. Where if you're a chief of police, you had a mayor or maybe a board that maybe a mayor put together to pick their chief. So at the end of the day, when they come to work, they got to make sure that they're at the marching orders of their mayor or the board or a commission that they're answering to. Where as a sheriff, I got to answer to population of Bartholomew County is about 80,000 people. I got to take every one of them in consideration on everything I do. And, because if I don't, then we're term limited in the state of Indiana. I feel blessed to be term limited. I think all elected positions, my personal opinion, should be term limited. I've got 8 years, and I've got 8 years to make my positive mark, and I got to take every day at a time and work hard to do that. So I like. I think I enjoy. I never was a chief of police. I mean, as close to it as I was a chief deputy, but I like the setup of sheriff much better than the way a chief of police is, because being an elected official, it does take me in a lot of other directions and have to be at different events and different things like that that a chief may not necessarily have to be at. But it puts me more in contact with the citizens of the county, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it
And,
does.
and trust me, people are not bashful about calling their sheriff, because I am their person.
Working in the city police as well, and getting to the high level that I did there, and seeing the types of politics that take place at that upper level. As a chief of police at a municipality, particularly in the state of Indiana, where they're not elected, you're appointed by the mayor. You're really kind of stuck many times having to make decisions, or I should say the decisions have already been made for you. You just have to communicate those decisions down to the officers that have to do it. But as sheriff, you report to the electorate, so that's very important to you to make sure that you are meeting the requirements of that electorate. But it also gives you a little bit more flexibility and power than, say, a chief of police would.
Yeah, most definitely. I agree. I mean, my budget's approved by the county council, so I can't just go rogue and buy a bunch of stuff or give whatever pay raises for whoever. But I do answer to other elected officials, the county council and the commissioners. When it comes down to contracts and different things like that, there's things that I have to run through the commissioner's office, the executive branch of a county. But there's a lot of other things that I have a statutory responsibility, and one of those is the health and well-being of the inmates that are in my care. And right now, I got about 290, I think today, is my jail population, and I'm personally responsible, you might say, for their care and well-being. Plus, got 130 employees, from the road patrol deputies to my correction staff to nurses to this clerical staff in general. We run the sex offender registry that's through here, to civil process, to courthouse security. There's a lot of things. And when I came over here from the city police, there was an old seasoned deputy, and been here for 30 plus years. He said, Chris, don't think this is the city police, and you can't. It's a total different animal. And trust me, there's a lot more moving parts at a sheriff's department, because when you think about a municipality, a police department, your responsibility is policing for the most part. At a sheriff's office, we're the tax collector. We're in policing. We're in corrections. We're housing inmates and people pending trial. We're the officers of the courts. We're the ones going out there serving civil papers and all those. So there's a lot of other caveats that I have responsibilities for. Sheriff's sales, if somebody's not paying their, making the payments on their house can go to a sheriff's sale. We have to handle those. So yeah, there's a lot of different civil responsibilities at the sheriff's office than there definitely is in other types of policing.
So I'm curious if you can think of a specific incident in your law enforcement career. What specific leadership challenges have you faced? Is there anything that pops up that, really kind of hits home all of the stuff that you've kind of learned?
I've learned one thing: nothing surprises me anymore, whether it be from employees to the what people will just do. It just absolutely. Some of my staff will come in and say, "Well, you're not going to believe this," and I say, "Yeah, I will," because you can imagine it can happen. But one, I guess, specific incident, I don't know. There's just been so many. I think when you get into these roles over so many times, it's hard to pin one specific oh wow moment, you might say, because I think it's a culmination of just a lot of different things over the years and having experience in so many different areas, whether it be from the investigations to just policing in general, and then now at the sheriff's office, we're in the corrections side of it. I'll tell you, one of the biggest learning curves I had coming here was from a city department is we didn't have a jail. You didn't have a city jail. we didn't have that, and now I had that responsibility, and I never worked in a jail prior to. A lot of folks had some experience, got their start before they went off into policing, working in corrections. I didn't have that, so I had to kind of learn that whole thing. And you know, like I said, I got nursing staff, medical, and all that I, you really don't think about. So to place put my finger on one thing, that'd be pretty difficult to say, Steve. I think.
I've often said that the higher you get in your organization, the less power you actually have. What do you think about that? Would you consider that to be a true statement in your experience?
Oh yes, most definitely. I mean, I, I have people that come through and say, "Hey, Sheriff, you're doing one hell of a job. Keep doing it." I was at a DARE graduation the other day, and there was a reporter from one of the indie news channels that was there, and he goes, "I said, I hear nothing but good things." I said, "Yeah, but I said I got about 130 employees and about 290 inmates. They can make me famous in about 30 seconds." And because I'm going to be the one at the face that's going to have to explain whatever. But you do have to have a lot of faith that everybody's doing the right thing, and because I can't be here 24/7. Sometimes I think I am, but we have other rank. I have other positions for a reason, and I have to, and those folks that are in those positions, they're there for a reason, and I have to let them be able to do their job. And I can't come in and just micromanage them, or one, it's just not going to work. They're going to resent me. I'm going to get frustrated. So I have to have faith they're doing it. And you're right. When you think about it, if you're just a patrolman and you're out on the street, you have responsibility of one person, and that's yourself, right?
Right.
So you're out here, and you only have to lead yourself. So you're just leading, and you're doing your thing, and obviously you got your coworkers you're working with, and that, and you're helping each other out. But every time you go up, you lose a little bit of that, because you have to have more faith in everybody around you that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing is that while you're interacting with the public, you're not interacting with the public at nearly the rate your officers are. So they have to be a reflection of you, right?
All day long, yes. Every one of them is a reflection of me. And you know what? Not just reflection. They're a reflection of the office of sheriff. I'm not one of those. There's a lot of leaders that think that it's all about them. That's not me. I'm holding a position in time. I'm the sheriff. Guess what? When I get done with hopefully my 2 terms, there'll be somebody else sitting in this corner office, and they're going to be the sheriff. So they're a reflection of the office.
I would say that there are a lot of great police administrators out there, chiefs of police and sheriffs across the United States. But unfortunately, I don't know that that's the majority of police administrators. We seem to be having a problem at those higher levels of policing across the United States right now. Why do you think that is? Or do you disagree with me completely?
No, I do. I think there's some change. And I mean, policing has changed so much over the last 30 years. It's changed in the last 3 years. And you have to be progressively thinking. And obviously, I knew coming in as sheriff, one of my biggest challenges was going to be staffing and being able to hire and retain employees. And everybody thinks, this generation or that generation. Well, I'm part of a generation. We all are. The older generations like to point the finger at the younger ones. But at the end of the day, we have to be able, as leaders, you have to be able to adapt to change. And one of the things that I put in place, and essentially I told you I had a $14-15 million budget. I'm really I'm running a business. That's the difference when you get into higher levels. When you get to be chiefs of police or sheriffs, you're pretty much a business manager, because you're at this budget, you got to staff it, your people, and you got to take care of whatever you're taking care of. And one of the things I did is I got a good friend that was we're fortunate to have Cummins Engine Company here in Columbus, and he was a vice president and had been a reserve force for years. And I approached him. I said, hey man, I need some help. I said, I got, because I'm just a cop, that's all I've done my entire life, supervise cops. But I'm now in a role where I really got to manage a business too. So I brought him on board and kind of took some different business concepts. And I do think that leaders need to start embracing the idea of getting people involved at younger times in their department. Because what I'm seeing in our newer generation of law enforcement officers, if they don't see the next step in front of them real soon, they're quick to move on and they'll go someplace else, whether that's getting out of law enforcement altogether or go to another department. So you have to be able to have them, to allow them to be part of the conversation. And that's not, during my career in law enforcement, that wasn't the way things were done. It was very much a paramilitary that went down. You had a chief, you had your deputy chiefs, captains, lieutenants, and sergeant. Everything kind of started at the top, moved its way down to the lowly guy at the bottom. And we kind of, I think, over the last couple of years, what we've done here is kind of I've allowed it, and I'll be the first one to say it wasn't easy for me because I grew up with that. Things start at the top and work their way down. We started more of a bottom-up approach and bottom-up leadership. And we started creating different teams of whether it's a staffing team or an equipment team or the hiring process team, the corrections team, the FTO team, our diversity team, all these different teams. And we basically put that out at the beginning and said, hey, what do you have an interest in? What do you want to be? Or what would you like to do? So we created these different teams, and those teams are made up of anything from patrolmen or just a CO corrections staff to some of our civilians are on those teams. And then they come up with the ideas, and then they bring that up the chain to where it finally lands on my desk. And I think that's been very well received here. And I haven't heard of that being utilized at a lot of other departments. It was something that I picked up from more of the corporate world. It wasn't my idea. It's just something I had to kind of tap the right person on the shoulder and let them run with it and then have faith to do it. And I think in the long run, I know my younger officers are a lot more engaged. And I think that's important. And I think because right now on hiring and recruitment, it's tough. It's a dog-eat-dog world. And you got departments stealing officers from other departments. So to me, I got to focus just as hard on retention of what I have than I do just the recruitment to fill the boots.
That's a great idea. Absolutely love that. And I'll have to ask around to see if anybody else is doing something similar to that. And I think that's a beautiful focus, as you said, getting the younger officers engaged early and getting them engaged in ways in which you and I never had opportunities to do. Not only does that keep them a part of your department, but it also starts building skills that they might need later on in their leadership journey.
Most definitely. And those teams, some of those teams the leader of that team may be a sergeant, and there may be a lieutenant or a captain on that team, but that sergeant is the one leading it. And it may be, I've got a couple of teams that the leaders, they're not holding any rank, but they have other team members that are sergeants and lieutenants. So, and I'll give you an example, just like our fleet, our cars. Well, I got a fleet team. Well, when it came back to buy cars, when we had to go to the commissioners and get those approved, that sergeant who would have never had an opportunity in years past was at the table making that presentation also. I wasn't even there. It was my major over operations and that sergeant that really went there and made that. I just gave the blessing. They ran with it and went and did it. So I think we get a lot of people involved because I remember being out here on the street. You'd park your cars and side by side and driver's window to driver's window, and you're sitting there complaining about, well, why is admin doing this? Well, if they can say that now, but they're going to say, well, you might want to go down there and talk to Sergeant so and so because he had a little say in what we put in that car also.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. As we wrap this up, Chris, What advice do you have for younger officers just starting their leadership journey?
Take advantage of any training that you can get when it comes to leadership. And I know we kind of beat up on the online stuff a little bit, but if that's what you have available to you, take advantage of it and do it. I think anything that you can do, and any opportunities that you can take a leadership role outside of the agency, whether that's to be on a board, like we have a local police athletic board. I was on that board. I mean, those put you, and my boys, when they were growing up, I was on little league boards and different things like that, but I was in a leadership role on those. That's experience. It may not have anything to do with policing, but that's experience. So anything that you can get involved in, whether it's outside the department, and it really puts you in a position to make some good contacts that can come back and help you when you're in a leadership role. Just like here, I reached out to somebody that, he'd been a reserve, been around the department for 30 years in that capacity, but I knew his strength was in the business sector. Help me run this as a business. And you make those contacts and develop those relationships. There's people that's going to help you. Trust me, there is. And I just think that, being able to take criticism sometimes, and to be humbled a little bit, sometimes people struggle with that. And I think sometimes you just need to take a step back and regroup and listen to what somebody's telling you. But, don't pass up an opportunity. And a lot of times when you're in your darkest days or whatever, and whatever chaos is going on, sometimes what will pop up will be the biggest opportunity you ever have in your life to seize and to step into a role.
Chris, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on. And good luck over there in Bartholomew County.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. And this is the first time I've ever done one of these, but it's pretty fun. We can do it again, maybe.
You bet. And that's the story we have to tell. Thank you for joining. As always, I'm curious what questions you're getting asked. What isn't the news covering? What story needs to be told? Connect with me at bluecanarypodcast@gmail.com.